There is this global food crisis. More than 20 countries have now made restrictions on the exports of their food products. And the lingering war in Ukraine continues. So there is really major disruption of food supply chain. And so this is a big problem. If I have to equate this is like a pandemic as well.
You heard outgoing Agriculture Secretary William Dar's reaction to President-elect Bongbong Marcos's decision to take over the DA.
Secretary Dar says he welcomes the decision, especially now that the Philippines faces a looming food crisis. Time for today's biggest headlines. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. As he takes the helm of the Agriculture Department, all eyes will be on incoming President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and whether or not he can fulfill a campaign promise to bring down the price of rice to 20 pesos a kilo.
But outgoing DA officials are not keeping their hopes up, saying the move will require 245 billion pesos in subsidies yearly. For them, the lowest rice could go is at 27 pesos a kilo. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez gives us a front seat to the big story.
Outgoing Agriculture Secretary William Dar says that while he's supportive of President-elect Bongbong Marcos's goal of bringing down the price of rice to 27 pesos and 50 cents, seems to be the furthest we can go right now.
The nearest we can go by now, 27 pesos 50 centavos. To be more practical with the setting we have in the country, by the end of 6 years, that will be a formidable legacy of the administration.
Marcos announced earlier this week he was taking over the Agriculture Agency for the time being. Samahang Industriya ng Agrikultura or SINAG said it was the most welcome development. But the challenges, it says, will be gargantuan. The DA has long been warning of a food crisis, brought about by the twin problems of the war in Ukraine and continuing pandemic. It predicts food prices across the board will continue to increase in the coming months.
This coming 6 months. The main reason is the increase in production costs. The increase is about average of 3.13 pesos per kilogram of rice. So, tumaas na talaga.
Based on the DA's estimates, in order to bring down the price of rice to about 20 pesos a kilo immediately, the government will need to provide around 245 billion pesos in subsidies.
If the price of palay is 19 pesos, which is the NFA support price, that means in the retail market, it will become 38 pesos. That means the price difference that you have to subsidize is 18 pesos. The budget of the Department of Agriculture, unfortunately, is only this year 85 billion.
Secretary Dar says they've come up with suggestions on cutting prices to the level that the incoming president wants.
We are more than willing to brief and assist President-elect Marcos in our joint aspiration to attain food security and ultimately food sovereignty.
But at the same time, Marcos has already indicated he wants to reorganize the agency. He pointed out that were offices under the DA that were underutilized and needed to be retooled. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
What immediate steps should the Department of Agriculture take to prepare for the looming food crisis? That big question and more with outgoing Department of Agriculture Secretary William Dar. Secretary Dar, welcome to the big story. Secretary Dar? May problema po tayo sa audio?
Ruby and Gretchen, magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Good evening.
Magandang gabi po, Secretary Dar. Secretary Dar, as you know, the incoming president has to guide the country out of a health crisis. He has to move us out of an economic crisis, revive industry, and so on. How big of a challenge is he deciding to take on directly by taking on the agriculture portfolio?
Well, we see this as a, strategic move of the president to be at the helm of the Department of Agriculture. And we welcome this decision by the President. This is the brand of political will that we have been advocating since we took over in 2019. And so we are really ready to brief him and give him all the necessary plans and programs so that we can take off in a big way while handling this looming food crisis.
As people pin their hopes on this decisive, as you said, and courageous move on the part of the incoming president, he will also have to manage expectations in the first 100 days, given that a lot of the factors for the food crisis are also external. What are some realistic targets that he can promise and deliver on in 100 days?
Well, number one, we have an action plan to mitigate the impacts of the Ukraine war. That has to be properly be funded. Of course, we have started realignment of our budget for 2022, but we need additionally 24 billion to make it possible that we are able to mitigate such impacts. And if I have to point out, these are fertilizer subsidies, fuel subsidies, urban, peri-urban agriculture, local feeds formulation and production, aquaculture and mariculture fisheries, and food mobilization, among many others. So this is a very urgent agenda for the next 100 days. On top of this is also to now start reforming the agency, issuing executive orders like transferring Food Terminal Incorporated to the Department of Agriculture, creating, for example, a Bureau of Agri-Industry Cooperatives Development, because farm consolidation is a major strategy that would bring into collective action farmers in various municipalities and so on. There is a long-term agenda also in place. So it's such an important part now in the history of the country to really put in place all these fundamentals so that we can weather the storm, so to speak. During this crisis, we are able to survive and now set the growth with which we can unlock the potential of Philippine agriculture.
Okay, Secretary Dar, maraming salamat po. That was Outgoing Agriculture Secretary William Dar. We will continue that conversation on the chiefs immediately after the big story. But it's not just rice authorities that have to be keeping an eye, that we will have to be keeping an eye on. There's also been an uptick in the price of sugar. Gretchen, how much of a spike are we talking about here?
Robbie, let's take the case of white sugar. It used to fetch for 65 to 80 pesos a kilo, but it's now selling for as high as 90 pesos a kilo. Washed sugar is also now at 60 to 70 pesos from 50 to 70 pesos back in May, while brown sugar went up by at least 8 pesos to 55 to 70 pesos a kilo. The United Sugar Producers Federation points to price hikes on fuel, fertilizer, and rent for the markup. The Sugar Regulatory Administration is closely monitoring the sugar supply in the country. These are the other big stories tonight. You might just want to cook your own food at home, as eateries and fast food places have also started to jack up prices to offset the rising cost of goods. Meanwhile, more Filipinos lost their lives overseas, this time in New Zealand, after a fatal highway collision between a truck and a van. And will the NU Lady Bulldogs finally get a taste of the UAAP volleyball crown after 6 decades? We give you updates on that after the break.
story. I'm Robbie Alampan.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Fresh produce might be a tad bit more expensive nowadays, but cooking food at home might just be a better move to save on cost.
This as restaurants and even Carinderias have started to jack up prices of items on their menus. Shaila Francisco with the story.
This Carinderia in Mandaluyong has hiked prices by 10 to 20 pesos amid the non-stop rise in food costs.
Tumaas po ako yung bilihin. Hindi naman kasi na yung permanenteng bentahan ganun pa rin. Kaya langan talaga tumaas ng kahit papano.
This is why customers like Jonah are forced to buy only half of their usual order to save up.
Mas mura sa Carinderia talaga kumpara sa fast food. Yung dating 50, 79 na ngayon. So medyo ramdam din.
This month, some netizens also observed that prices in fast food chains have gotten more expensive. One extra rice, for example, is now equivalent to the price of 1 kilo of rice in markets. Currently, prices of some meals in fast food chains cost 66 to 140 pesos. This is higher by 1 to 15 pesos from previous months.
Kahit tumataas, syempre masarap pa rin yung hinanap-hanap pa rin namin.
Sa halip na may rice, chicken, ito na lang na price na lang at saka yung hamburger na lang.
Jollibee Foods Corporation said the rising prices of food, oil, and other commodities in the global market affect their pricing. While they offer promos, it may not be as frequent as before to manage costs. McDonald's Philippines, meanwhile, says their price increases are below inflation level and the quality of products are maintained. The group Resto PH noted that the whole F&B industry is now dealing with higher prices, but smaller stores like Carinderia are faster to react.
For restaurants like us, we need to secure our supply for weeks, sometimes months in advance. And that buys us some time.
The Trade Department said they don't regulate prices in restaurants, but here's their advice to the public.
They can look for promotional products na binibenta, hindi ba? Nakapackage yan.
Shaila Francisco, VR1 News.
Cooking food at home might not just be the more budget-friendly option, it might even be the healthier choice, especially now that health experts the world over are warning that fatty liver is turning out to be a silent epidemic. Find out how to reduce the risks in Yeda Pascual's report.
Aside from COVID-19, the world is facing another crisis. Only difference is, it's not a virus, but a disease, fatty liver. Now called as a silent epidemic, a study says 1 out of 4 people in the world has it, either due to genes or unhealthy lifestyle.
In the world and also in the Philippines, that fatty liver will be the fastest rising cause for liver cirrhosis, liver cancer, and the fastest rising reason or root cause for patients needing liver transplant.
Individuals who are overweight and diabetic, as well as those who have high blood and high cholesterol, are more prone to having fatty liver. And because it has no symptoms, one might not even notice it. But worry not, Dr. Tripon says this can be treated.
Number 1 po yung cutting down on alcohol. If you are overweight or obese, when you drink alcohol, there is no benefit. It's absolutely detrimental or masama for your health na.
To help reduce the risk of having fatty liver, she said one should exercise for at least 30 minutes a day and limit the amount of cholesterol consumed through food. If allowed, drinking black coffee is advised as it lowers an individual's chance of having liver cancer. Also recommended is a consultation with a specialist like a hepatologist and gastroenterologist.
Hindi dapat isawalang bahala. Ang importante kasing maalala is pag na-catch mo to very early, you can decrease the risk of progressing to liver cirrhosis and even liver cancer.
Anyone can have fatty liver, regardless of age. So as they say, be a liver lover. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual, We Are One News.
For the big story in sports, Magnolia forward Calvin Abueva has been sanctioned by the PBA after his ejection from the Manila Clasico on Sunday night. Abueva has been fined 10,000 pesos and suspended for 1 game for unsportsmanlike conduct during the game against Barangay Ginebra. Abueva first got a warning after a similar offense last season. The Magnolia Cager will sit out the team's next game against Phoenix on Friday at the Mall of Asia Arena. Time for another quick break. When we return, The Philippine Embassy and Overseas Labor Office in New Zealand have extended their assistance to the Filipino family reportedly killed in a fatal road accident in Picton over the weekend. And the fatal shooting of a Filipino lawyer in Philadelphia was a case of mistaken identity. Police officers investigating the crime say the gunman appeared to have fired at the wrong vehicle. These big stories after the break.
Still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. More bad news for jeepney drivers as government's fuel subsidy program ended in several routes last week.
Meanwhile, bus companies are also joining the call for a fare hike increase amid the continuous oil price hikes. Gerard de la Peña with the story.
This is Rodolfo's one and only meal for the day. The jeepney driver is trying to make ends meet as he only nets about 200 pesos per day. From his earnings, he has to set aside more than 2,000 pesos for fuel and 500 pesos to pay for boundary.
Yung almusal ko na lang po, kape na lang po. Hanggang doon na lang, tapos nagtataga ng titis.
Some jeepney drivers rely on the government's fuel subsidy program. But this ended last week in 118 jeepney routes in Metro Manila. Subsidy for 28 more routes will also conclude by next week. It aims to extend the provision of free rides at the EDSA bus carousel by end July or until funds get exhausted.
Ang service contracting program kasi natin under GAA 2022 ay magtatapos na din because of the exhaustion of funds. If there are assistance from the government na may ibibigay talaga, yun na muna, and the last resort would be the fare hike.
Bus operators are also joining calls for a fare hike. The Mega Manila Consortium asked the LTFRB for an additional 7 pesos that will bring the minimum fare to 20 pesos. They also asked the agency to raise the minimum fare of ordinary buses to 15 pesos from the current rate of 11 pesos. Commuters, however, admitted that it would be difficult for them should the free rides at the EDSA busway end coupled with the fare hike.
Mahirap lang po talaga. Kaya mag-adjust at mag-adjust, magbabudget.
Siguro bira na lang ako sumakay.
Ganon.
Oo, tsaka yung kanto-kanto, lalakarin ko na lang.
The LTFRB said it will hear the petitions of jeepney and TNVS operators before the end of the month.
Hindi lang kasi to simple na kahilingan ng yung the usual before no ng mga because of fuel price increases ay nag-i-increase tayo. Kung hindi, it has something to do or it has already affected the supply on the ground.
The LTFRB noted that more than 5,000 public utility vehicles have delisted, while many others chose to temporarily halt operations due to soaring fuel prices. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, We Are One News.
And here are other big stories around the world. The shooting of a Filipino lawyer in Philadelphia might have been a case of mistaken identity. That's according to the Philippine Consul General in New York City. In a tweet, Consul General El Mercato bared that attorney John Albert Lilo's gunmen might have been chasing a similar vehicle as his Uber ride and fired at the wrong target. That's according to police sources. Replying to incoming Foreign Affairs Secretary Susan Ople, Cato said that they are keeping in touch with investigators and will hopefully see Philadelphia's mayor and police commissioner. Lilo and his mother's Uber ride were shot at by still unknown assailants. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, Filipinos were among the 7 killed in a fatal car crash south of Picton Town. Among the Filipinos killed were Divine Dolor, her daughter Flor de Liza, and Dolor's sister Desiree Brown. Also killed were Brown's husband Paul, his son Mark, and a relative with her 10-month-old baby. The family of 9 were riding a van Sunday morning when it crashed head-on with a truck carrying refrigerated goods on State Highway 1. Desiree's sons, Pedro Clariman and Louis Lagud, survived the crash but sustained injuries. The truck driver, meanwhile, suffered minor injuries.
Another big story in sports just in. The NU Lady Bulldogs continue to make history in the UAAP after almost sweeping the awards for season 84. After an impressive all-around campaign, NU Super Rookie Micaela Belen made history by winning both Rookie of the Year and MVP honors. It's the first time that a player has pulled off the Rookie MVP double in UAAP women's volleyball. Aside from Belen, NU's Camila Lamina, Jennifer Nierva, Eliza Solomon, and Sheena Turing also took home individual awards for the season. And to cap off that spectacular season, the Lady Bulldogs finish off the DLSU Lady Spikers in Game 2 to capture their first title since 1957. NU weathered a rather slow start to the game to take the first set 25-15. That was then followed by a strong second set 25-15 and a nerve-wracking third set 25-22 en route to the championship. Galing. After 65 years, they finally take home the title. And I was telling you a while ago, I was watching this game before the newscast, and I was so amazed at how good the young ones are. And many of them are rookies coming from the NU High School volleyball program. They won 5 championships back then, and now they take that to the women's program.
And congratulations to the NU Lady Bulldogs and to the NU Bulldogs. I was telling you kanina, diba? Whatever they're doing at NU, their investment in sports has really been paying off across all sports.
Tatanungin ko nga sana kasi bukas baka mag-guest ko sila sa frontline sa umaga. Tatanungin ko anong kinakain nila doon. Makakain natin yan.
Abangan natin yan.
Oh, may pakain tayo ngayon, di ba?
Oo, pa-burger! Finally!
Masaya tayong lahat. Congratulations once again, NU Lady Bulldogs. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And get vaccinated. Philippines, I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.